You're watching the Metaphysical Mentor podcast with Michael Philpott. We are recording. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. She calls herself a holistic nutritionist. But you know what, Mandy? I'm going to change your name to holistic entrepreneur because you do so many things. But we're going to talk about a few things, but you never know. I have an idea about the show and then where direction we're going to go. But I have a feeling we may just go all over the place because you just have a wealth of knowledge on it. So Mandy, how are you, my friend?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you for being on the show. And I have to give a little shout out to Cheryl Kraft for connecting us. For those who don't know Cheryl, she was just on the podcast. We had a really good show. We talked about forensic mediumship. But we're going to be talking about holistic health and gut health for all those listening today too as well. We're going to talk about getting your health back in order. And of course, Mandy's an expert, but she's an expert in all things I'm finding out now. So, which is really fantastic. So we're going to have lots of fun with this show. So how did you get into holistic nutrition? Because you come from a background as an engineer. So how did you make that switch from engineer to holistic nutritionist?
Yeah, so it was all completely by accident. So I was working as a power engineer. I really loved my career. I really liked the people that I worked with. And in my mid-20s, I started to get sicker and sicker, and I became very, very sick. And so basically I began down my own health journey to figure out what was wrong. And I kept trying to figure out, pinpoint that one thing that I thought it was that, I could take a pill or, I get a diagnosis and then boom, everything will just, be perfect. And that's totally not what it was like at all. And so it was really just in my own search to really gain my health back because I got so sick. Like where I was working, I worked away from home, but it really wasn't that far away. But because it was shift work, I had to rent where I stayed. So it was actually only a 45-minute drive from my house to the place that I rented. And I was having to pull over 3 times to nap because I was so exhausted. I was afraid I was going to fall asleep at the wheel. Like that is how sick I got. And it was through my own journey of going down here that I realized I actually I felt like, I was really good at my job, but I felt like someone else could take my place and replace me. But that there wasn't someone speaking about health from what I had been through. And I realized that everything that felt like a complete shit show, and I was stuck in victim mode for a while, I finally realized like this was all a gift. You going through all of this crap and all of this pain, that's a gift because you working through that, you can help people and speak to it from a very we really need to take a step back when we're looking at our health. We can't just pinpoint, zone in, and then disregard everything because everything is connected in our physical health and our emotional health. And basically that's really what led me to, I went from a very left-sided mind, very scientific, to being a lot more open because I had to keep searching for things. And that was really just what led me down this road to where I'm at now.
So what were some of the underlying problems you were facing? So obviously fatigue was one of them. And obviously from shift work, and anybody who's ever worked shift work, it's shit. Like literally, it's not fun. Like it just throws your body way off. I mean, I used to travel for work for a bit and I worked different time zones and that would just throw me way off. Like it took me days to recover from that. And plus it was a fairly high stress job. But at the same time too, so you had fatigue was one of the problems you were facing. What was the other, some of the symptoms you were facing too as well?
Yeah, so absolutely no energy was the first big one, and digestive problems. So what that looked like, and I'm a person who always shares too much information because when we don't, then people feel shameful because nobody's talking about these things from these perspectives. So for me, I had constipation, but I was so out of touch with my body, I had no idea that I was constipated. So there was that. A ton of bloating. And one of the things, like bloating might seem like such a small thing, but it's actually a really big thing because it hugely affects your confidence. It affects your sex life. It affects everything. It affects how you sleep. So many things there. And so I knew that I had something called SIBO, insomnia. I was exhausted, but I could not sleep. I could not shut my brain off. And if I felt like I even fell asleep, I was waking up anywhere from 3 to 7 times a night to pee because my body was so sick. It was just pumping everything out. It was just peeing all of my minerals out and everything. And so when you're waking up, 7 times out of the night, when you don't even honestly almost feel tired because you didn't come out of a deep sleep. So then you just kept on this cycle of feeling so exhausted, and then a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of that. And then I was also having a lot of issues with food sensitivities, which I thought was kind of one of the root problems. Later on, learned that is just a symptom. Same with everything else I mentioned. Everything that I mentioned seems like it might actually be that thing that's causing everything, but it's not. All of these are just symptoms of deeper things that are going on, which I didn't know at the time. And you have to kind of get further down that rabbit hole to really start to realize that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so amazing once you start realizing, the root causes behind the things. And for a lot of us, again, we always hear it's like, it always starts with the food. Okay, it's usually a gluten allergy, a dairy allergy, and things like this. And, I've had other people I've talked to, naturopathic doctors, and they say a lot of times it's not that. I mean, like I said, it's a symptom, it's aggravating stuff, but it's not like you have to get off gluten. I mean, cutting back on gluten, sure, if you wanted to, but there was always something else behind the sensitivity that's causing the inflammation in the body, that's causing all this, as you would say, like the root causes of it. So if you had to figure out what were some of the root causes, like through your detective work, because that's basically what we do, right? As somebody who's going through health crisis, we kind of do our own detective stuff. We kind of figure out, okay, what's going on? So is this working? Okay, maybe I'll try this. Let's do a little bit of this. And then you start figuring out. So when did you figure out what was the root cause for your stuff?
Yeah, so it definitely took years into it. And I needed to realize that, and this is for every single person, no matter what you're experiencing as symptoms, it is not just one thing. And I think it's helpful hearing that at the beginning, because then as soon as you think that you might be finding an answer, you zone in on it and you kind of stop there, honestly. Like sometimes getting a quote unquote diagnosis, people feel such a sense of hope, like, yes, and I know because I was there. But what happens is it stops you at that, and it makes you think that this is that thing, when actually there's so much more healing that needs to be done. So for me, what it looked like was, so there's always like an emotional side, and then there's a physical side. So on the emotional side, this took me quite a while to realize. But what I started to realize was there was a lot of emotional trauma not being processed from childhood. Now, when I say trauma, we really need to expand on this, because so many people just think it's abuse, it's sexual abuse. It's these things that are really terrible that you'd really think of as a trauma. There's so many other things. So the biggest thing for me from childhood, there was kind of two aspects there. One was, we grew up with very little money. And so scarcity is one thing that I see hugely affects people, how they manage their money, and also their health, their physical health. Even if you're not in that situation anymore of having scarcity, it will still be in your body. You haven't processed through it. So that was a huge thing for me, was just that constant fear of scarcity. And then also I came out of the workforce in 2008 in a recession. The industry I was also in was going through almost their own recession in the industry in 2015. And so it felt like these constant hits that I hadn't worked through, of scarcity, of fear. Fear is such a big one. I think people are really realizing that now over the past 2 years. The other thing was the connection between my mom and I. We really didn't ever have a great relationship growing up. Like my family has we have an extremely genetic heart condition, and my mom was constantly in and out of the hospital for surgery. She probably had about 30 surgeries in her lifetime before she passed away. And my little brother, he had a lot of heart surgeries as well from 4 months old. So growing up with someone that had so many surgeries, even before I came along, who has a lot of struggles with their health, like every day, how that person shows up in their life, there was a lot of family dynamics. That's a big thing people don't talk about, is family dynamics, how that wreaks health. Like there is actually direct correlations with people who have autoimmune diseases and the relationship between you and your parents. And if you have a relationship that's not very strong with one of your parents, you have a high chance of an autoimmune disease. And if you have a poor relationship with two parents, it just skyrockets for autoimmune, but also chronic illness, which is what a lot of things fall under. I never really knew the term chronic illness. Looking back, I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I was going through, but didn't realize it. So that's the emotional side. A lot of baggage I had not sifted through, because also this was before We had Instagram it was so easy to find this information, to go down a rabbit hole as you're laying in bed on your phone sort of thing. So there's so much more information now. So that was the emotional side. Now for the physical side, which this also took quite a while until I really found people who really dove into the true root cause. Like they just kept going, this is a symptom, this is a symptom. And you need to keep going deeper. Once I started to realize, okay, parasites. I did stool samples, like stool testing in the past. They're so inaccurate. The chances of a stool sample finding parasites and you getting that result is so very slim. So I had done those.
Okay. So how did you go from, I'm just going to slow the roll here. I mean, I don't mean to, but it's just, okay. So you realize, okay, the emotions, which is so true. That is one of the biggest things that I had to learn myself. And I'm still working through that even to this day. And so you went from the emotions like that. So then how did you go from the emotions, working on the emotions, to now looking at parasites? And how did you figure, okay, there may be some weird, funky stuff living in my body. How did I figure that out?
Yeah, so really for the parasites part, that came about from finding some Instagram accounts and just going down a rabbit hole and going, oh my gosh, these people get it. And understanding that there's better testing methods that can tell you, or that can indicate, that are basically showing patterns that there's a potential chance for parasites. The other thing that people need to realize is, when we think of parasites, we think of like you went to a third world country. I honestly haven't traveled a ton. I haven't even been to Mexico, sort of thing. And that's really what you think about for parasites.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Parasites, everyone has them. If you have a pulse, you have a parasite. Think about our animals, like cleaning cat litter, anyone who has a cat. That's why when it comes to, if you're a pregnant woman, they tell you, do not clean the cat litter because there's the cat parasite that can get into the fetus. So that's where like parasites are actually a very common thing that we need to not think of as, oh, you're dirty or you have poor personal hygiene, or only if you went to a third world country. They're everywhere. They're a part of our life. Like, think about this. You deworm your animals. People also need to be dewormed. And in countries like here in Canada and the States, we operate very differently when it comes to health versus other countries where they deworm on a regular basis, like people, because they get it. But over here, things are just very different. And we have more of like a, pharmaceutical, you give it a pill, we don't see things as holistically. So that's where I started to go down that rabbit hole and seeing, okay, well, everyone has parasites. It's just to what extent. And it's never that you're going to completely get rid of parasites. It's just that they're not affecting you on a daily basis. Like, I'm just going to give one thing here for people to think about. I have on my Instagram, on my Instagram, I have a post about parasites, all the different symptoms. So people can see, oh, like for example, if someone is to drool at night, or if you have a really itchy butt all the time, those things are indicative that you may have parasites. Also, when we think about, let's say you eat dairy and it makes you sick, everyone thinks it's the dairy that's the problem. Everyone's like, oh, well, you can't have dairy. You're lactose intolerant. First thing you hear. But nobody ever tells you, you know what, actually, if you have parasites and you eat dairy, what happens is those parasites will make it so when you eat it, you will more react to it because they put off these toxins, which then can make you feel sick. So a lot of times, once you've cleared parasites, some people can have dairy. So that was one of the things. I can now have Greek yogurt where for 6 years, I could not have it at all. So really? That's just to give people a little bit of an idea when it comes to parasites there.
Now, is that the same thing with Candida too as well? Is that a totally separate thing? I know parasites is more of an organism. Well, I guess Candida, it is. And it just basically is a yeast versus parasites?
It's a yeast. And I actually want to dive into that because I know it was the question you had. So we're going to dive into that in a little bit because I want to talk about that because people do know about Candida. So I want to talk about that connection to root health in just a minute here. Okay. Also, another one that, like, when we really think of root causes, heavy metals. I also had those in my system. So there can be all sorts of different ones. The ones that we knew that I had were mercury and aluminum. So mercury, think of if you have silver fillings. I had 6 of them. I had them removed in the past kind of 7-ish months. So that was a big one for me. So
okay, so how did you find yourself after that? Because I have them myself. Actually, I got to get rid of one of them anyways, but I have heard so many different things about getting them removed. And there was always like this argument that it will cause more toxicity because when you get them removed, because you're chipping away at the tooth and basically the filling, which is causing them to, you're going to ingest them anyway. So it's going to get into the body. So, but I've heard so many other things on the other side where it could be so like, it could be like a night and day thing. Like you don't even realize it. And all of a sudden your energy starts, changing. You get a little more excited. Like everything just you start feeling better. And I know I've been wanting to do that for a while to get them out. I have a few left in my mouth I want to get done. So how did you feel after? Did you notice like a big change in your energy, how you felt?
I'm so glad that you asked this. And before I answer that, I want to touch on this. So what you had said is absolutely true. When you're taking them out, you can basically like reinfect your body. So this is why you do not just go to a regular dentist and get them removed. Like this is something that really you do quite a bit of planning for. So for example, the person that I went to was a biological dentist. So I completely switched dentists. I looked it up online.
Okay, I'm just going to hold you for a second. Okay, so just to explain for people who are listening, what is a biological dentist?
So basically they are like a regular dentist, but they have more holistic, they've got more tools in their toolkit and they look at things differently. So they can still do the same things that a normal dentist does, but they basically have more training and they might try different methods first. Like for example, root canals are actually huge things that are affecting people because you're leaving something dead in there. And that can be a huge thing really affecting people's health. So from a biological dentist standpoint, a lot of them will try and do a lot of other things before resorting to a root canal. So I'll just throw that out there for that.
Okay,
but
perfect.
When I went, I had a consult. We really talked things over. I asked a lot of questions. There was a book that I had read. I believe it's called Holistic Dentistry, but I will look it up and you can put it in the show notes if you want. Amazing. Everyone should read that book. And so I did not passively read this book. I was taking notes, writing down the questions that they were saying to ask someone. So I had them all written down in my notes section. I went in and I said, do you have this? So basically, when you go in to have them removed, they should be taking way extra methods. Like this shouldn't be like, if you've ever had a cavity replaced or a cavity put in, it should be a very different situation. So for example, and I have a picture of it on my Instagram so people can see this isn't a regular dentist visit. Because I don't want you to just go in and get them taken out one day. Like you should actually prepare ahead of time. They will tell you the procedure. But for example, I did high dose vitamin C leading up. They also want you to do it in a very specific form because you're taking quite a bit. And if you take it in certain forms, bowel tolerance, you'll basically, you'll be crapping your pants sort of thing. So they'll prepare you for that procedure. And then when you come in, I had a big long gown. Everything was covered up. You couldn't see my face. You can't see my face in the picture. I had air so I could breathe and everything is very, very covered in my mouth. So then when they're taking it out, it's not going down my throat. It's not, yes, you're going to get a little bit, but they've done everything possible that they can to make it. Oh, and then another really big thing is that they have I don't know what you'd call it. It's kind of like a fume hut, but basically it's sucking out the vapor. So they've got a big kind of fan, I guess, that is attached here to suck it out to get those vapors out. So you want to go somewhere that this is not the first time they've done it. This is not just, I had someone send me a message and tell me that her dentist just said, oh, do you want me to take them out while you're here today? And she had them removed and it broke my heart a little bit. That is not what you want done. You do not just want to show up that day. And then also, so I afterwards, right after this, then I went and I had vitamin C, a high dose, like intravenous.
Yep. Yeah, IV. I was going to ask you, did you go for intravenous? Yeah, because
I did. Yeah. So I went to a naturopath's office right after that to have that done. And then I just really made sure I took care of my body. The other thing is really just think of that kind of as the first step. So what you also want to do is, this is where I was working with a practitioner at the same time, to also take what's called a binder. That is something that is specially made to grab the things that you're trying to get out of your body. So we're talking about heavy metals right now. So
would that be like something like charcoal or even like bentonite clay or something like that? Something that will, like an absorption will hold on to those heavy metals and stuff? Something similar to that?
It is similar to that. So that is a type of binder. It's not the ones that you really want to use that often because they kind of just bind to everything. So what you want is something very specific that's made for that specific thing. So there's different binders for heavy metals, for Lyme, for parasites, for mold. So this was one that I took for heavy metals that was specific. So I took it leading up and I took it afterwards as well. So anytime that you have something removed from your body, like let's say, for example, I'm just going to throw this out here. This is something totally different, but like breast implants. There's a lot of women that have heard of like breast implant illness. If they get their breast implants removed, that's still just the first step. They still need to go through a whole procedure afterwards to remove a bunch of extra stuff from their body. So that was another thing, was the heavy metals aspect. I didn't notice as much of a difference as I've heard other people, but I think it's because I did so much leading up and I really worked on huge aspects of my health that it wasn't, I think for people who might be feeling a lot more sick, it may be, but it's still, at the end of the day, still depends like what other root causes you have going on. But I have heard of people absolutely who it was a complete game changer. That wasn't how I felt, but I was very, very happy that I had them out. And I knew that at least it was one less thing that was just constantly, you know, I was chewing on them all the time and just little fragments breaking off for how many ever years going forward. So that was...
Yeah, it's amazing how like something simple like that, and most people don't think about that on a scale. Like, I mean, you think about it, you would never drink mercury, you never stick aluminum, even though we cook with a lot of aluminum cookware and all those sort of things. So would you also like say maybe just like, you know, look at your cookware too as well?
Yes, 100%. And even like think about it this way too. So this is super unfortunate, but a lot of our personal care products and stuff that women put on their bodies are filled with so many things that are ruining your health, so many toxins. Like when someone is struggling with fertility and they go into a doctor, there's so many questions that I wished people would ask them. Like, okay, I think that you probably need to get rid of like 95% of the things that you put on your body. Get rid of it because it's really affecting your hormones when you're trying to produce a baby. So this is where things like your deodorant, your breasts are so close to your armpits. Most normal deodorant has aluminum in it.
Yeah.
So that's where like switching out products like that, or even like baking soda or baking powder, some of it has aluminum in it. So that's where really there's a lot of things that have stuff in it that should not. So it's just being really, really reading things over and understanding what types of things, what things have in them. Like there's just so much stuff, especially when I think about a woman uses approximately 30 different products a day. Most of them have crap in it. And then also if you think of like, if you use Tide or like regular detergent, you're washing your clothes, you're wearing your clothes all day long. And that has chemicals and toxins in it.
Yeah. I had a doctor on and we talked about chemical toxicity and stuff like that. And I mean, I knew a lot of this stuff, but I wasn't practicing it. But when I heard it again, it was like, oh, frick. And I instinctively started doing that. But there was like cleaners, like you just realized, okay, you know, you start using bleach and Javex and clean things, right? And all these other really heavy chemicals and chlorine. And she was like, do you know what chlorine does? And I was like, well, I kind of knew, but I didn't really know like the effects of it, what it has in the body. And of course it smells clean and disinfects and all that stuff, right? You just use the stuff that you're kind of brought up with, right? So you don't really realize how damaging they were. I know myself, I switched my laundry detergent. That was one of the first things I switched out because I was noticing like that, even just the smell of the perfume from the detergent was like, I mean, it was kind of making me a little bit of nauseous. So I'm thinking, geez, I'm having my clothes on it and I'm wearing this every day and that's going to be leaching into my skin. I was like, come on, I don't need this. But yeah, it's so kind of crazy when you think about it, all the things that we have to deal with. And I know, because I used to work in an industry where I had a lot of friends of mine would sell cosmetics. And a lot of them were switching into heavy metal free, like no more cadmium, no more nickel, no more all these other metals. And I was like, you kidding me? That's all in beauty makeup and creams and all this other crazy stuff. And I'm like, how the hell do they get away with that shit? Like that always just baffles me.
Yeah, it should have never have been in there in the first place. And so it's shocking. Even this is one of the things I think that disgusted me the most, that was something I learned way later, was like, if you think of like products that women use, like tampons, some of the things that are in there are should not be inside of a person's body. And it's not like it's on the label. You really have to go down a rabbit hole for that. And so that was something that really broke my heart, because most women, like you don't read it on a label, but when something's in such a small amount and depending on how they classify it. So that's where, switching to things maybe like a Diva cup or something that really is a lot healthier for your body. But that really blew my mind as well. I did want to touch on, there was 2 more root causes that were coming up for me as well.
Yeah.
One was Lyme and Lyme co-infection. So this one I'm not going to dive into too deeply, but a lot of times when people think of Lyme, they just think of if they were bit by a tick and got a bullseye. Lyme is super hard to get a diagnosis for, because to get actually a positive blood test, you have to know exactly basically when you have been infected, and then a certain amount of weeks, and in a very, very small time frame. So it's pretty hit and miss for anyone. The other thing that people need to be aware of that I wasn't early on was, when it comes to Lyme, it's not just ticks biting you. It can also be mosquitoes. Well, I'm outside a lot of time in the summertime, and I'm constantly swatting. Like, so I just think of how many years that's been. Also, it can come from a mother into the placenta. So there can be people that are born with those symptoms. It can also come from sex. So there's a lot of different ways that Lyme can affect you as well. And another one is,
So I just want to touch on the Lyme thing here, because I'm an outdoorsman too. So it's always a big thing. And I know it's a really big issue now, Lyme disease, especially now that the warm weather and stuff like that, and tick populations are kind of crazy and going crazy. So even though you get bit, even if you don't think you got bit, but the signs and symptoms are not going to be as prevalent as like a full-on blown, kind of Lyme disease situation, but you can still have that pathogen floating through the body and not realizing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when it comes to Lyme, it's very interesting, because some of the symptoms can be, there's a lot of different types of Lyme that you don't really think that's what it is, because they're so easily masked by something else. So for example, joint pain can be a big one, a lot of different neurological things, even pain on the bottom of your feet. So that was one of the ones that I was going through that I didn't feel before, but as I was working and we were moving it through my system, all of a sudden on the bottom sole of my foot, I started to have pain as I was working through it. So it's really interesting that it can look like something completely different. So that's where Lyme can be a really tough one, because it masks itself super well as something else. And that's why sometimes people don't look at it as what they may be experiencing.
Interesting. It's such a crazy shit disease, because and we're just finally starting to get some funding and testing, and doctors are finally getting on board, finally realizing that, yeah, this is kind of a problem. I know it's more prevalent in the States because of the warmer weather and stuff like that. But as seasons change, obviously, you have horses, right? So obviously you got to be thinking about that every time you go through the brush, and they're going to be picking up. They're like a prime target for ticks. It's you got to be really managing that. So are you finding too that, even, I know this is a little off topic, but even your animal is getting more ticks on it than usual?
You know what? Where I live now, not as much, but where I grew up, about an hour and a half from where I live now, in our one pasture for our horses, all the time where they got ticks all the time. So the past few years, but I think it's just where we're at now, and where I live, we don't have as many trees right here, but I did used to see that quite a bit. Yeah. And for dogs too. Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff. Okay. So we talked about Lymes. All right. What's the next one?
The last one is mold. So this is a really interesting one.
Okay. Yeah. This is one I want to talk to you about. I'm really kind of pumped on, because I've heard so many freaking things about mold, and it's kind of like that mystery thing that most people don't realize how fucking crazy mold can be and how dangerous it is. And you don't even know it's even there.
Yeah.
I call it a silent killer.
Yes. So that's one that I really want people to just know about, because this wasn't even remotely on my radar when I was really struggling. So mold, this is something where even if you are not in the environment anymore, you could really be experiencing a lot of symptoms. And actually that's sometimes something common, where you might not be feeling very good when you're in that home that has mold. And when you leave, your body is finally away from it. So it might try to now detox from it. And if you aren't, you don't have open drainage pathways, you don't have things to grab to it, you can actually start experiencing more of those symptoms. So when we think about mold, this is where I want people to really expand when you're thinking about this. A lot of times people just think like a flooded basement, or something that you really know happened in that house, for example. It can also be in the workplace. Like, this doesn't just have to be in your home. And this really just comes down to any water damage. Anything at all. And a lot of times you do not see it. Or this is where maybe even a company's cleaned it up and they've used bleach or something. Like, that does not do it. The other thing is, let's say you knew you were in a home with mold and you moved, but your belongings all still have mold on it. So you brought it into this new house. So this is one that this is a pretty tricky one. there's a lot of aspects involved. And I really just want people to overall know, like, this can be from, let's say you overran the sink or the tub, or someone before you in a rental house or in a house you own. Like, it doesn't have to be a really big thing. It can be something much smaller. And I'm not talking black mold that you see, like, absolutely. But there's a lot of times other mold that you don't see that really is causing an issue. I had a girlfriend that had moved into a rental and really started experiencing a lot of respiratory problems. And it was crazy when she moved out of there, how much her health changed. And I was talking to her and she's like, oh my God, I'm sure that it was mold, because she said, it's the only thing I've changed. And she was a very healthy person. And it was crazy just how much that was affecting her every single day. So mold is one where it's really, really tricky. Yes, you always, everything I mentioned here, you do not want to be taking a DIY, looking at things on Instagram, piecing it together and doing it. Please do not do that. This is really for the overall awareness and to know to dive deeper with someone, because everybody's body is different. And, but this is something you'd want to work with a practitioner on. Yes, actually detoxing it, but also looking at, are you living in a home with mold? What is that situation? Like, I do know some people who've had to do repairs in their house, like, pretty extensive. And also really, this is where you need to do a lot of work, is looking for someone who's going to repair it in a way that really is not just band-aiding the situation. Again, like, there's quite a bit of work to be done usually when it comes to removing mold, doing kind of a reno, or if you rent, then moving out of your rental and finding somewhere else, sort of thing. So there's a lot of aspects when it comes to the mold, but I see a lot of times you can put on a lot of weight when you're either in a mold situation, or sometimes when you come out and your body's like, oh my gosh, I want to get rid of all this mold now.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, as well. I mean, I hear a lot of things with mold with food now, and especially with something I learned, not too recently, I guess, was mold on coffee. And I was like, what? And I'm like, how the hell do they screw up my cup of coffee? Yeah. I know, it's like, I mean, mold like on your coffee. And it's like, at first, I'm always a little bit skeptical, and I'm kind of going, yeah, I don't fucking know about this. Like, this is sounds a little crazy. But then I talked to one doctor, talked to another naturopath, talked to another holistic practitioner. People were telling me, like, there's mold in coffee. And I'm going, what? And then all the different foods and all the different things you find in the grocery store that, you don't realize that are there. And it's almost like I almost want to give up eating. No, I honestly, I would never give up eating, because I love to eat. I love to cook too as well. But yeah, something that I found out was really bizarre.
Absolutely. So that's where there's a type of coffee that I use that is actually, it is certified mold free, and it's amazing. Like, it's an incredible health product.
Is that King Coffee?
It is King Coffee. Yeah. So that's something I hugely do recommend, because if you think about how often people are drinking coffee, sometimes people I know people who drink 8 cups of coffee in a day. So you're doing that every single day for how long? I went to school with a guy that just during our class hours in power engineering, he was drinking 2 thermoses. And I was like, no wonder you're buzzing. Like, you're literally vibrating trying to get through class. But that's what I mean, is like, when you're starting your day with this, when you're drinking and you're consuming something that has mold, it's absolutely going to have an effect on you. So it sucks that every aspect of our life, we really have to take such a deeper look. But this is the world we live in. Like you had mentioned earlier about, like, I don't know how people have gotten away with putting the things in our foods, our products that they have, like how it's gotten through. But it's unfortunately the world that we live in.
Well, we kind of know how it gets through. We all kind of know that. We're all starting to realize the bullshit behind the scenes. The curtain is being lifted up, and we around the world are kind of, as consumers, and people are saying, this is kind of bullshit, man. So we won't get more into politics, but we all know what's going on. We all know. We get it. House. One of the things I wanted to touch on is about leaky gut syndrome, and I know a lot of people are dealing with a lot of health issues. And I've always been fascinated to understand. I know that's one of the things I've kind of learned about myself is the leaky gut syndrome, stuff like that, and how important gut health is to obviously the overall system of the body as well. Not just the skin, but overall just feeling better about yourself, your energy levels. And I've always wondered, how the hell do we get so, what's the word I'm looking for? How do we get so discombobulated that we developed like a big holes in our gut linings to allow this stuff to happen? So how do we get there?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of things to take into account. Like, stress is a huge thing that wreaks major havoc on our digestive system. So there's that. There's also our digestive habits. Like, we are in such a hurry that we are just scarfing down our food. And that is something like for digesting is a terrible thing. The other thing is, like, we drink usually liquids. How many people have heard drink a large glass of cold water with your meal? That's quite possibly one of the worst things you could do from a digestive standpoint. Your liquids should actually be away, and you shouldn't be drinking super freezing cold water. So that's something where you want as much digestive juice to break down your food, and you're putting something that's alkaline when it needs to be actually acidic. So you're making it like way harder on our bodies to digest food. And when you have particles that now are too big, they're supposed to be really small before they're passed on, it does start to create, inflammation and cause issues in there. So when we think of things like that, there's really quite a few things. There's like reducing stress before meal times, trying not to eat on the run. Like, I used to eat all the time out of my vehicle. I was busy. I would literally scarf my food down and then go. My husband and I are like the slowest eating people now, because he has slowed down, because I slowed down, and it makes a huge difference. Like, even when I worked with clients where they really weren't listening to a lot of suggestions, but when it came to them slowing down.
Hold on for a second. Hold on for a second. Let me just interrupt you for that. Are you saying that you have clients that don't really listen to you?
There's definitely there's definitely people when it comes to like nutrition or changing certain habits, and them having a really hard time with them.
Okay. So it's not just me that has clients that don't listen to me. Okay. I just want to make sure.
Every single coach has this. It's just, I think some people just don't admit it. But they started to work on their digestive habits and reducing stress. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe these symptoms are feeling better. And I'm like, yeah, I told you it does but people don't think that this is going to make that big of a deal. And then when you're having more like leaky gut and trouble with that, sometimes that's when I am not a big fan of restrictive diets. I think it causes actually a lot more harm from an emotional standpoint. And from then people are just afraid that they're like, I don't know what the hell ever to eat. And so then they start having more eating disorders, because I've been there 100% as well. But sometimes understanding what season of life with your health you're in, that maybe you might remove grains and you might remove nuts, because those things can make it more difficult while you're bringing down the inflammation, calming it down, and just like sealing up that permeability where stuff has been getting through and causing more food sensitivities and different things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Cause I have a friend of mine, she does fitness, health and coaching stuff. I had her on the show, and she's very much the same mindset as you. Like, she was not like, she calls it like the 80-20. And, here she is like eating hamburgers and pizza and shit like that. And people are going, how the hell do you stay so skinny? And she says, well, I balance it out. Like, I don't get into this restrictive diet thing. And I think that really, that is a problem, is when you get too restrictive, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't have that. You just gotta, it's a lot of it. I mean, my understanding is just a lot of balance. It's just making sure that you're eating more of the good stuff than the crap stuff, and then doing other stuff. But, one of the things I want to kind of go back to, we talked about stress, and I know you do, when you're working with your clients, how much of the stress element are you treating versus the diet that you're treating? Because I know you have a lot of holistic stuff. Like, I mean, you do EFT, you do tapping, NLP, things like that, which I love that shit. And I think it's a fantastic. If you never did any EFT treatment, if you don't know what it is, maybe we'll talk about that. But yeah, so do you integrate a lot of that prior when you have your consultations? Like, okay, this person, we got to get their stress level way down before we really kind of get anything else.
Yeah, really, it starts with like the more basic things that people really just want to dive in hard and just go. They want to take those supplements that are going to start, really working and that sort of thing. It's like, no, those are actually the last things. Because if we put those in right now, you are going to feel 100 times worse, because you're not ready for it. Things aren't getting out of your body. Like, if you are too stressed, the stress and constipation, that is such a huge thing. And this is really important. Like, I wish that every single doctor, anyone that does anything in health or anything stress related, everybody needs to be asking their clients, how often are you pooping? Do you have a bowel movement every single day? Why? Because we can't do these other high level things unless someone's actually eliminating and getting literally the shit in their body out. Because what's happening is, if it's sitting in there for 3 days or a week, you're going to start to have where there's fumes being given off, and it is auto intoxication. You're literally getting sick from the stagnant stuff in your body. So
that
that's
makes
where,
total sense.
We need to address stress, because there's a lot of aspects there. So we're not going to go further down the rabbit hole. And even, for example, yes, let's talk about diet, but we really need to still, I think one of the big things is that I've learned is you need to meet people where they're at. You cannot give them this high level protocol if they are not there. Like, let's say, for example, if I was working with someone who was another health practitioner, because health practitioners also work with health practitioners, or someone who is a really health-minded person, and someone who they just found me on Instagram and they're like, this is really interesting, and this is the beginning of their journey, they're going to have two completely, let's say that they had the same things that were quote unquote all same symptoms. They're going to have two completely different protocols because this person's probably a lot more ready, and this person, we have to do a lot more basic stuff. So that's where we really need to take things back to the basics for people, and everyone wants to jump over that. And so stress is one of those things, like if you are just trying to out supplement your stress, you're not going to get anywhere.
Because so many people get down that road. So if we could just say that again.
Yeah, you cannot out supplement your stress. If you're trying to skip, I think there's two things. There's stress management, meaning there's certain stresses in our life that are hard to get away from, and just everyday stresses. We need to learn how to manage that. But then there's also things that we need to really reduce and try and see how could we eliminate. Maybe there are toxic people in your life, different things like that. So there's two of those aspects. And one of the things I love to do with my clients, tapping is one of my number one go-tos because it's very accessible. It's easy to teach people. And the other reason why I love tapping so much is because I explain to my clients, first I tell them about it so they actually understand. Because when I first started, I was like, I don't actually think this shit works. That's my honest opinion. But that's because I didn't get it. Like, I just started diving in and doing it. But what I love is I tell my clients, you have a lot of fears, you have a lot of worries, you have a lot of stuff coming up in your head. I want you to get that shit out and then say how you want to feel and shift into the pause. So I always have my clients, you're saying like the deepest, darkest things out loud, because what's usually happening, especially when it comes to like women and different things, is you're feeling so much and most people are keeping it in. When I was really sick, nobody was saying, what is really causing you so much stress, Mandy? Nobody ever asked me that. I spent $30,000 at that time, and that question was not asked once. And it would have been a really helpful question. It might have also been hard for me to open up. So there's that. We need to feel safe in our space. You're usually not going to tell your doctor that when you have 15 minutes to meet with them. You need to feel comfortable with the person and have time. But that's a really big thing, is everyone is going through and experiencing so much. We need to take into account modalities for that. So I love that because it's an everyday processing the stuff you're going through. And so that's something I love clients to do, because it's an active processing versus things where there's other healing modalities that I really like as well, but they're more passive, and it's kind of like you're kind of outsourcing it to someone else and then just hoping that everything gets better. I love tapping because like you're actually saying like relationship problems, money problems, fears about coronavirus, like whatever that is. And you feel heard and understood when you are able to talk about the real shit and the real problems in life. So that is why I love it. You're getting it out and then shifting. I also do like hypnosis, but that is more on the subconscious side, and that is more passive. I love that as well. But for every single day, I'm huge. So long story short, stress is a very big part that needs to be addressed here.
Yeah, it's amazing how stress, and like you said, like a lot of the stress is, like it could be subconscious stuff, from trauma from childhood, and it doesn't always have to be such, dramatic stuff like, abuse and things like that. But there is a lot of that stuff still, along with a lot of people have that unresolved issues. And I know myself, I had a ton of unresolved issues. I was listening to you and I'm going, yep, that was me. Mm-hmm, yep, that was me. Yeah, autoimmune disease. Yep, that was me. Being sick in the hospital. Yep, that was me. Oh yeah, I had a shitty life. Yep, that was me. Yeah, I can relate to everything that you're saying there, and that's why I was so happy to have you on, and I really loved your process and how you deal with clients, because I wish I would have known some of the stuff I know now would help me out. Like spending $30,000. I wish. I spent a lot of money on therapy, and I wish I would have known a certain therapist, I should have went to, and versus the therapist I was going to, but it freaking helped me out a lot, especially my pocketbook at the time. And that was just to keep my head above water so that I can just function on a daily basis, because I was just going through the shitstorm. And, it's so amazing. And I love the tapping. And I really remember the first time, and it was one of my therapists that got me, that was doing tapping. And I was like, really? And this is again a guy's perspective, right? Whereas guys, we're going to have this like, yeah, this shit's going to work. This is a little too woo woo. And this was before I was really introduced to woo woo and what was going on. I was like, okay, you want me to tap my hand here and talk about how crappy my life is? Oh, you want me to tap my forehead, tap my lip here? Okay, yeah. And then as I was doing that and she was guiding me through it, I get a little weepy. I could just feel this stuff coming up. And I was like, okay, I'm just keep tapping and just keep saying it. And I know she's watching me and I'm trying like, typical guy's like, I ain't fucking crying. There's no way I'm going to cry. I'm not going to cry for this person. And I just lost it. And it's like the floodgates started opening up and I'm I'm almost on the ground in a fetal position crying so much. There had so much trauma. And that was only the tip of it. There was so much deep stuff underneath there. And that's why, I love anything that does energy work, especially something like that. Like you said, it is passive, but it's not passive. It's a very active thing, even though you don't think it's doing something, but it really is. That, and also like EMDR, I'm a big fan of EMDR. I don't know if you have any of your clients do EMDR, big fan of that too, as well. It's just so find so fascinating. Do you find like you have to kind of go very specific with clients? You have to kind of go, okay, this person may be an EFT person, maybe this person is a hypnosis person or an LLP, or do you kind of go like, just kind of figure it out as you go along?
I kind of just feel out that particular client, and I might give them more information because for example, my male clients, I'll give them more background just as you said. And I'll always say like, I know that this might seem woo-woo and I also didn't believe it at first, but just humor me, just do it. And what I find is most people, if you were just to tell them to tap on their fears and worries, they really wouldn't know what to say, honestly. So what I do is I like prompt them. I really help them to get going. And I also make it very specific. Like I really drill it down. And as they're saying it, it's kind of like they're saying it. And then kind of at the end, they're processing and they're like, oh my God, those things you said, I didn't even know that I was thinking. I couldn't even have said that. And you hit the nail on the head. So that's something where I think sometimes we're so disconnected from our emotions. I was like the most disconnected person, which is why I'm so
I don't know about
passionate
that there.
this.
I don't know, man. If there was a trophy, man, I might be fighting you for that one.
And so that's why I think it's just so important to talk to people about this and to make it, so give them some background, help them through it, and to let people stumble. It's going to take them some time to get used to it, but just keep with them. There was something that you had mentioned earlier that I want to just make sure we touch on is the depression connection with this. This is something that I think is really important because when we think about depression, a lot of times we just think like, my diagnosis is depression. This is me. Like people say I am depressed. That's taking an identity and they'll wear that forever. And they think that it's going to have to stick with them. And some of the things that I say really probably honestly piss people off a lot, but it's what they need to hear to challenge their thinking of maybe they stop thinking here. So depression is very real. I'll absolutely say that. But we need to realize it is so extremely multifaceted. There's so many things. And if you just think that if you need medication or you want to go without, I am supportive of whatever someone needs in that season of their life. So I'll also put that out there. But we need to think that there's so much more going on. Okay, inner child wounds, like everything we just mentioned about not processing. That's a huge one. Traumas, but also I want people like trouble with setting boundaries. Things in our relationship, like those are huge. And also things like heavy metals, they affect the brain so heavily. It's crazy the effect that they have, and parasites. And it's interesting, if you start to learn more about parasites, how it affects men and women is very different. Men, a lot more impulsive. They might actually be more prone to speeding. That's something. They, a little bit maybe more anger. For women, it's also very different. It might be a little bit more on the depression side. So men and women also are very affected differently by these types of things. Lyme and mold. So if you have these root causes going on, and you've got stuff you're not processing, and you're living in 2020 to 2022, I
think that's maybe 80% of our population.
Absolutely. So that's where seeing, as I started to clear my different root struggles, it was crazy how I just felt better. Oh, one other thing I want to make sure to mention is sunshine. Oh my God. This is such a big thing. We are electrical beings. We literally need to get charged. Vitamin D really comes from actually hitting our skin. So if you're covered up all the time, And if you live in Canada where it's cold, where I'm at, it is hella cold outside right now. I'm bundled up. You can only see my face when I'm out there. But that is a really, really important piece. So for example, in the summertime, and I'll totally share this, I try to spend as much time as I can, kind of like 20 minutes to an hour a day outside on my trampoline naked. I also live somewhere where
hold on for a second. You actually shared that, okay. So I just don't want to make sure there's no creepy people listening to this show, because we'll have to make sure that, okay, you're living in Vancouver, right?
No, I live in Saskatchewan. So I live.
I'm trying to make sure that. Yeah, I think you missed my point there.
No one will find my house, so I'm not worried about that.
Okay, good.
The reason that I share that is because what happens is so many people are so afraid of the sun that they're covered up so much. You have sunblock on all the time. That's not good sunblock. So vitamin D actually physically needs to hit your skin to do the conversion for your body to use it. So that's why I openly share that, is because to help people to realize, like, yes, please still wear sunscreen, but maybe the first 15 minutes you're outside, allowing yourself. So maybe instead of being really bundled up, you might wear a bikini top and shorts outside at first for 15 or 20 minutes. Like, it was important to me to share that so people just understand that you might be outside, but your body actually might not be getting very much vitamin D. And then if it's cold half the year, so that's a really big thing that plays into depression too, is not enough sunlight.
Yeah, I hear that, like seasonal affective disorder. Everybody talks about it too. Now, one of the things, touching on sunlight, what about artificial sunlight, like tanning beds and stuff like that? Because I know a lot of the European countries, and even in Russia, I heard too as well, they would actually have like these photo light booths, like even like they call them even like tanning beds, just to help with the vitamin D production in the very northern parts where they don't have, they have those, 3 months or 6 months out of the year that have, no sunlight at all.
Yeah, so I think it just depends on the very specific bulbs, like what kind of light that is. Like, I know the tanning bed that I went in when I was younger, totally not a good one, definitely one that's not good for your health. But there's things like red light therapy. That is something that a lot of people do that is really helpful. So depending on what kind of bulbs they would have, I would say that would be just the biggest thing. But I do know a couple people who do stuff like that, and it does make a difference on their health. So that's just what I would say, is just as long as it's not something that can lead to cancer. So it would just be the specifics of the bulb. But that is something where, like, even a happy light, different things like that. Like, I use a red light and I really like it. I find that it does make a difference for me. And I'm someone, especially, I know February every year is usually a pretty tough month for me. It's been cold for so long. I also had a friend that committed suicide when I was 16. We had his funeral on Valentine's Day, so I'm not a huge Valentine's Day person. So every year February is kind of a tougher year for me, and I know that it makes a big difference when I use my light consistently.
Yeah, it is really amazing how people are always happier when you go on vacation, especially something warm. As Canadians, we always kind of get the short end of the stick when it comes to weather, and that's why when the summertime comes, it's like, oh my God. And I've been so jealous of lately, because I've had some of my friends on Instagram, they're showing me their pictures like, oh, I'm in California. Oh, I'm in Florida. And I'm thinking, son of a gun. Well, I'm not saying son of a gun. I'm saying something else, but I'm not going to repeat that on air here. But it's amazing how, you just feel better when you're outside. I mean, I'm always a big fan of nature therapy anyways, just to get outside and get that. I mean, I live in the concrete jungle right now, totally hating it, to be honest with you, because there's just so much construction. Like, I was like, speaking of construction, I was so worried about the podcast, and I've been doing this for almost a year now. And when I first started doing the podcast, I was like, okay, you have to forgive the construction. The construction hasn't stopped, and it's still continuing on. I thought, oh my God, this podcast, I'm going to have to reschedule it, because like right here, like literally if my window is right here, there's a construction site, like they're building condos, and it's just going to be crazy. So, but anyways, that's me just, venting right now again for the 100th time. But anyways, nature therapy. Love it.
I'm a huge fan, and that's something that I wished, when you're out in trees, that's something I grew up where we didn't have a ton of trees. And then when I started going hiking and stuff, I just felt like a completely different person. And you're grounding. So that's just something where even just getting outside a little bit each day really does make such a huge difference. And also the air in our homes is way more toxic than the air outside. So everyone cooped up the past couple of years, that's not a good thing for us either. So making it a priority to just get out and with no agenda to do anything, just spend time outside actually makes a big difference for your health.
Yeah, it makes 100% difference. I mean, it is a lot of times, it's just the simplest things. I always say start small and work your way up. It doesn't have to be something dramatically shift like that. But again, depending on where you are in your health scheme, I mean, if you're really in a dire needs, yeah, you got to do something a little bit drastic and you got to hit at it, full steam at it and take no prisoners type thing. But if you just want to overall improve your health and vitality, we all want to do that, right? And especially over the last couple of years, right? Everything's been a shit show, and everybody's, we're going through ups and downs and trying to maintain our health, and there was no sense of normancy. Normancy, is that I say that right? I don't know. Not an English major. You have to forgive me on that one. But yeah, it realizes how difficult it can be, and just the small little things that can change. Now, do you always recommend just doing something small first and then kind of working your way up?
Yeah, because it's the things like my biggest thing is helping people to change their habits. So I don't want you doing something that's more of a one-off thing. Everything comes back to consistency, your health, your finances, all of it. So if something seems more doable, you're going to do it more often. That's what's going to lead to change. So everyone knows they need to drink more water, but I'm not kidding. Like, we need to have enough water to flush all this out of your colon. So that is a huge thing, because most 70% of people still are chronically dehydrated in Canada and the States. So we still do have a lot of work we need to do here. Another thing I love for people to do for a small thing is putting like Himalayan or sea salt in your water and on your food. That is incredible because you're getting minerals into your body. That's a great way, especially if you drink RO water. That's something I wish that everyone who has RO water, we have RO water. We had three people.
Hold on. Again, you have to explain to this because I don't know what that is. And just want to make sure that my listeners know what that is.
Yeah, so it's a reverse osmosis. So it's just a system to filter your water. So what reverse osmosis does is it takes all impurities and minerals out. So everything that's bad, but also the good. So now you have very clean water, but there's no minerals. So using a little bit of salt in your water, and you can just start small and work your way up. Like, I'm not drinking salt water. Like, I'm not like, oh my gosh, it feels like I'm like drowning right now and I'm drinking this. So that's something. And because when it's in water, it gets into your cells better, because a lot of times someone will actually be drinking a lot of water and they're peeing everything out because a lot of the problems that are going on. This helps you to actually feel like you're retaining a little bit more. It helps you to on the mineral balance. So that's something I do recommend for so many people to do. And another thing that I love is doing detox baths. So basically putting, a couple of actual cups, like not just a little bit of Epsom salts, like literally like 2 to 4 cups, start small, work your way up in your bath water, because it's very accessible. There's other things that cost more. This is very cost effective. Doing that honestly a few times a week, that is something where it's got magnesium in it. So it's helping to relax your body, calm stress, helps with bowels. So that's something I recommend for lots of people. And then also, your lymphatic system in your body does not have a pump. Like, your heart is a pump to pump blood. Your lymphatic system is collecting all of these dead tissues and cells. And that's where, when it's not doing a very good job, then cancer can kind of build up because these cells haven't got out. So for your lymphatic system, jumping up and down, it needs a pump to move. So whether you want to jump up and down, you want to use a skipping rope. I do love a mini trampoline. I had bought mine off Facebook Marketplace. You don't have to spend a lot, but that's really amazing. Another thing is breathing exercises. That comes into the emotional side as well. When you've been through a lot, most people hold their breath. Like, honestly, most of the time, or you're just breathing in the top part. That is something
that was so really, me.
Yeah. And that's something I constantly have to check myself on all the time. You can look stuff up on YouTube for when it comes to that. And then the last thing is just to remember, when it comes to sleep, there's a lot of things that we can do to improve like our sleep habits. Not looking at your phone right before bed, which is a really tough one. So maybe your phone needs to be in the other room. If you use it as your alarm, maybe you need to actually have an alarm again, or just have it loud enough. But understanding your brain, it drains at night, but only if you're at certain hours and you need to be sleeping. So that's a really important thing, is to just think about, what can I do to improve my sleep habits? I know for me, so because I had such bad insomnia, then I started getting anxiety at night because I was how long is it going to take me to fall asleep? And would I sleep? So it really just compounded. One of the things that I tried was a sleep mask. This is a heavy one. This is not from the dollar store. It's like a heavier, it's quite heavy. And I put it on. It took me honestly about 5 to 6 weeks to get used to it. I would wake up in the middle of the night. It was off. I had rubbed it off. but something just kept telling me intuitively, you just keep doing this thing. And I'm so glad I did. I've been doing it for probably 6 years. If I could think of like the top 3 things in my life that I like, if I could only take 3 things to a deserted island, that sleep mask would be one of them. I love that thing so much because what it helps is, even with blackout blinds, I need it pitch dark. Blackout blinds still aren't good enough. It helps to make it black. It helps me to feel calm. I fall asleep so much faster. I stay asleep more. So that's something I paid $30, and I've given that as a gift probably 10 times because I believe so fully in it.
Yeah. For myself, it's actually headphones, noise canceling headphones, because I live in such a noisy building, and I had really high stress, and, I was always hyper vigilant. So I couldn't get to sleep because every little noise I get, it's like you're up and you kind of what's going on. But headphones, I mean, I just take, it's actually my shooting muffs that I use for shooting. I put them on, and it just deadens the sound. As soon as I have that, like my body kind of starts to relax. So it's funny. I take them with me when I travel too, because anybody who's ever traveled and you're in a hotel and people walking up and down all the time. And I live in an apartment building, so it's always noisy. So I can never really kind of get relaxed because I'm always kind of like, oh, what's that noise? And my neighbor upstairs and downstairs, and you know how it is. It can be a little nutty, but yeah, love my headphones. Love those on. Put those on. I look ridiculous. I come up out of bed and I look like Mickey Mouse, and I come up. But yeah, it's great because you just don't have that trauma. Like, I mean, one of the things I really love to do, I don't know if you've ever experienced, but they may have them out there out west, but is float tanks. I'm like a big fan of float tanks, and it's like my new favorite thing. And until COVID hit and they closed down the place that I was going to, but that was like, if you ever get a chance, you want to decompress, like, and just kind of have de-stress, float tanks is like my number one recommendation.
I do have to laugh a little bit when you say that, because I did try float tanks, and it was the only modality that I found doesn't work for me. It made me feel more anxious, and I tried it about 3 times because I'm like, oh, the first time it was a one-off. And just for me, I do have a harder time shutting off in there. And I've really tried to relax. So for me personally, I haven't found it, but every single other person I've talked to, it has worked for them. So the person listening, don't think it won't work for you. I think the outlier when it comes to float tanks, because I love a lot of other modalities.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, I love most modalities, but yeah, I did enjoy the float tank. And yeah, it's always something so fascinating. And one of the things I loved about it, the only thing that was different, because it is in the city, right? As soon as you get out, you're still relaxed, and you only hear like horns blaring and sirens and shit like that. So I always made sure that I wear like the earplugs that they gave you to wear them in my hair, so I don't, it's not as jolty. But yeah, that was one of my favorite things, just to be decompressed for a while. And yeah, but Mandy, I just want to say, thank you for being on the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I loved what we were able to dive into. And the person listening, I would just love you to, if this feels like a lot, because this is me distilling a lot of years of information into a 1-hour podcast, start with the little things and just being really, really consistent. And also just know that you are the person who is the expert in your body. So keep going. Even if someone is not listening, you're feeling not heard and understood, keep going, keep looking for someone else. I had to do that for so long, but I know that it can feel disempowering. But please just keep going and knowing that you know exactly what you're going through. So if someone says it's in your head or it's only this and is stopping there, please the biggest thing I tell you is to be consistent in your persistence in you getting back to optimal health.
Yeah, well said. Really well said. So that being said, Mandy, if people are looking now, there's another thing. So Mandy is not just a holistic nutritionist. She's also, I would call you a wealth coach. Would that be correct in saying that?
I consider myself like a financial coach or money coach. That's more what people understand. I think sometimes when people think wealth, they only think investments.
Okay. So Mandy has a couple of things going on. She is an amazing expert on that too as well. So if anybody's listening to this and they're looking for your services, Mandy, where can they find you? And give me all the Instagram accounts, the Facebooks. Where can they find you? Where can they find you on the World Wide Web? All that good stuff.
Sure. So I'm most active on Instagram. So on the health side of things, if you look up my name, Mandy, which is with 2 Y's, so Mandyy Thomas, Thomas, that's my health side of things. And then for my financial coaching, it's Intentionally Wealthy Co. So you can come there, you can check out information. learn a lot there. And then I have my own podcast as well that is Intentionally Wealthy. And then for the website, it's just my name, Mandy Thomas with 2ys.com.
All right. So I'll have all that information in a description below. So whether you're watching the video on the old YouTube there, or you're listening to this on Apple, Spotify, Anchor FM, and all those good places, just scroll down, just give a little bit of scroll. Mandy's all that information. I know she is highly recommended on all fronts. I think you're more highly recommended on the wealth coaching or the coaching itself on the financial end. But I hear you're quite amazing on the holistic too as well. So like I said, holistic entrepreneur on all things and all levels. And that being said, Mandy, I'm just going to close off the podcast here. So this has been the Metaphysical Mentor Podcast with Michael Philpott. Thank you so much for joining me, and goodbye for now.